So we are continuing with Venerable Pema's wonderful book, Practicing Peace in the Time of War, and going deeply into that series of contemplations that she offers. And let me pull it up. Okay, so just to review, we started out, as we always do in Buddhism, with the overall view. And the view that she presents is that the roots of war have to do with hardening the heart or closing the heart or shutting down. And that we can feel that personally, and we can see the results in the world around us when people are expressing why they're at war. Then as we examine that, we see that we are very easily triggered in small and large ways. We are very impatient, and we're bouncing back and forth between wanting and not wanting, or wanting, give me, give me, give me, or get me out of here, get this away from me. And then we investigated how there's always a narrative that goes along with this that we build consciously, and it feels as though it is very difficult to look at that narrative and start the calming down process. It's so much easier to let the anger build and stay in the anger, the outrage, or get me out of here with a piece of cake or a Christmas present. So she wants us really to understand how very difficult it is to look at the escalation process and the primal urge at the root of that it's so painful that we're afraid that we would die if we really looked at it. We've built up so much fear. It's so much easier to blame outer circumstances. And then last week we were looking at a great deal of our triggering has to do with life as it is in samsara, that we are encased in an illusion that everything should go easily for us, and that it's a problem when something happens. It's a problem when we get ill. It's a shock. It's a shock when someone is in critical condition. It's a shock when someone that we love dearly all of a sudden moves far away or takes offense and won't speak with us. So we were looking at that very old Buddhist prayer that is so beautiful about samsara. I am of the nature to grow old. I can't escape old age. I am the nature to grow ill. I can't escape sickness. I am of the nature to die. I cannot escape death. I will be separated from everything and everyone I hold dear. My only true possessions is my actions. So that prayer begins to teach us about our habitual resistance to the natural process of life as it is, and overcoming that resistance. This week, we're looking at a practice that Venerable Pema describes as compassionate abiding. So last week we were understanding our resistance, and now we're moving from resistance to compassionate abiding. So it's a way to be fully present in the moment with our eyes wide open with what is happening to us and what is happening to our dear ones and what is happening to everyone around us. And instead of resisting difficulty, welcoming it. So this is a big shift. So she's moving us ever closer both to fearlessness and to the bodhisattva capacity of being with whatever is going on, even in the hell realms. So to begin this, let's go to a quote from the book. Compassionate abiding provides a way to no longer invest our reaction with so much absolute truth. We can see our interpretations or opinions as just that, interpretations and opinions. We no longer have to be under their control or have them color everything we think or do. So let's take old age again, or illness. The illusion, nothing should happen. We should age easily. We should really never have a terrible disease happen. And when it does, there's a resistance, and that narrative that arises has to do with some combination, let's say, of blaming and shaming. We want to make it about outer circumstances, or we go, it's my fault, I did a terrible thing, it's my fault. And so we bounce back and forth to outer conditions, or blaming ourselves, in essence, blaming others or blaming ourselves, as opposed to just relaxing with the present moment. This is arising for me in this moment. This is a natural part of the life of any human being, that there'll be shifts and changes as we move in age. And I want to go even further with the idea of how to be welcoming instead of resistant. We are triggered so easily, just watching the news, or anger from difficulties in the past spilling out with our families, with the current political situation. So there's a level of anger that's just spilling out. And this quality of, you are making me suffer. It's not my responsibility. My heart mind is not my responsibility. You made me suffer. Or this event made me suffer. I fell and broke my ankle. It was the rock that made me suffer. And we want to start to understand that we have the capacity to be in charge of our heart mind. And Thich Nhat Hanh takes it even further in a very beautiful way. Once I had this image in my mind, I never felt the same about anger again. He was talking about welcoming in the sense of cradling your anger or cradling your addiction, whichever side of the coin you're currently working on. And just that, even just the motion of making our arms like this and imagining the anger and or the aversion or the addiction that we have as something to be understood and pacified, as though we were holding a crying baby. So it's not something we're afraid of, not something we're resistant to. We're welcoming and opening our hearts to this particular kind of pain that we're experiencing in the moment. So it's not only a new relationship to pain, as we were discussing last week, in terms of not resisting samsara, but welcoming samsara as it arises in the present moment, and welcoming each and every experience as a way to learn about our mind, our hearts, and how to soften in the difficult moments. So I'm going to invite you this morning to call to mind a recent experience, an experience you had this week, not the most difficult trauma that may be in your life, but again, something that made you impatient or aggravated, and just sit with it a moment and notice how you want to blame the circumstance. Last week we were working with something very, very neutral, getting impatient in a long line. So I can imagine thinking, I'm rushed, I have so much to do, I've got to get this shopping done. It's the fault of all these people ahead of me that I have to wait. There's a quick move from my impatience to blaming the outer circumstances. So let's call to mind a scenario where we're not moving into blame and we're not shaming ourselves either, repressing and shaming. I shouldn't have this feeling. I'm a good Dharma student. I should know better than this. But we're simply opening our heart in this moment compassionately. And I think that's the key word. There's compassion for ourselves, compassion for the situation. And as Thich Nhat Hanh was saying, there's this cradling of our anger or cradling of our addiction. So there's a fearless, open-eyed investigation as to how to observe the situation and not intensify the situation. So we're going to work with this a couple of times this morning. Let's just take a minute now where you call to mind a situation and notice your own habitual pattern, your particular way of escalating, making it worse by either blaming or shaming, and notice that blaming and shaming has to do with the outer, some other person or the outer experience. So let's just work with this a minute or two. Okay, now we're going to go a little bit more deeply into this. And I'm again going to a quote. This exercise of compassionate abiding, in this case, specifically abiding with the experience of aversion, consists of breathing in the negative feeling and then relaxing outward. Then you breathe in the feeling and relax outward again and again. You could do this for 5 minutes, for 5 hours, anytime, on the spot when the aggressive feeling arises. We do this for ourselves and all people who feel prejudice and disgust. and have no way of working with it, so it escalates into self-denigration, jealousy, and violence, and creates suffering all over the world. So let's call together the experience of aversion that we were working with, noticing the habitual pattern of blaming are all thoughts that are arising. And instead of focusing on these thoughts, we're cradling and welcoming with compassion what we feel in this moment and relaxing with it. We have compassion for how difficult it is, how hurtful it feels at first, in terms of our fear arising or the energy shifting in our body, can have a little physical experience. But we're seeing the welcoming and having a response of relaxing. And the relaxing is the absence of all of those thoughts. And we start to notice in the relaxing that the thoughts have no place. We're letting the thoughts go, and we're not building our case. And I just want to give this example. I don't know if that comes across on the computer. But when we don't energize the thoughts of the story and start to relax, those thoughts are no more real than the bubbles. They simply dissolve on their own when there's no attention. But one of the things that's particularly important in this quote that she gave, you can do that for 5 minutes, for 5 hours, and I want to go ahead and say 5 months, 5 years. There are difficulties in our richly lived life that we carry. And so the ones that we've embedded with a habit pattern may take many, many, many meditation sessions over a great deal of time. And I'm not saying this to scare you. I'm just saying that from my experience, it's not a simple practice. It's quite a courageous practice, and we don't want to give up. The Dalai Lama's wonderful prayer, never give up. So we don't want to give up and think that we're not capable of uprooting our anger or uprooting our addiction. So let's go back to, in our imaginations, pulling up a situation that caused an aversive response and or an addictive response. Get me out of here or help me escape. And we're taking that and we're forgetting about the outer experience. We're just not allowing our curiosity to go there. Instead, we're pointing our curiosity towards, what if I welcome this feeling? Instead of resisting it, instead of blaming, what if I cradle this like a crying baby? And what if I cradle it with great compassion for myself and everyone else who's feeling it? And what if I just relax so that my body is relaxing as I'm holding this crying baby, this feeling? So I'm observing this feeling screaming inside me, but I'm relaxed. I'm welcoming. I'm not afraid of this feeling at all. I'm observing it like the bubble, moving in impermanence into the next thought, the next arising, whatever that might be. And it may be this same feeling comes up over and over and over again. And that's why we don't give up for 5 minutes, 5 hours, 5 months, 5 years. Okay, let's start again. Where in your body do you feel the anger, the anxiety, the addiction in this moment as you look at this one particular feeling? Can you fully relax in this moment? Letting go of blaming any kind of outer circumstances and/or blaming yourself. How does the relaxed quality feel, the compassionate abiding into relaxation? How does that feel in your body as well as your experience, as opposed to being controlled or nearly controlled by the narrative? Just go back and forth a little bit, pulling up the story, feeling the aversion, feeling the anger, and then relaxing. So it gets tremendously interesting. Remember, in the first quote, Pema was saying that by this relaxing quality, I'm trying to blow the bubbles again, we have a sense that our experience is so real and so true that we should be able to blame. And, at this moment, this bubble is appearing, and it appears real and it appears true, but it's like our thoughts. They're impermanent. And so that blaming, when we connect it to our own suffering and our inability to move past the anger, and that blaming is dependent on many individual thoughts strung together that we believe are actually happening and are actually true. And at the same time, this is a memory. It is a conceptual thought that in this moment is passing and dissolving just like the bubbles. It doesn't excuse injustice, but it's how are we carrying our minds forward, and how are we able to use these experiences that we've had to dig deeper and find peace. And I wanted to use a metaphor from Maine for this. When I was doing the newsletter, I was going back to the winter scenes of lighthouses, and I just love lighthouses. They're all along the coast of Maine. And I really think of them as part of our bodhicitta ideal, that in a storm, the lighthouses are sending forth a guide and welcoming ships into the harbor. So we had a storm this week that was quite wild. Power was out all over Maine, and a huge tourist boat, a boat is the wrong word, a tourist hotel on the water, was diverted from the Bahamas to Maine. And it made me think that on that dark, stormy night, with power out so many places, the lighthouse could guide this gigantic tourist ship into the harbor because the harbor was deep. So as we go deeply into our practice and dig deep into our habitual patterns and create a harbor or a refuge, we can welcome more and more suffering in the folks around us and in our ability to observe samsara without reacting, but with a heart of compassion that's open. So this ship, I guess, was bigger than most of the buildings in Portland. And so it made me think, wow, because the harbor was so deep and because the lighthouses were working, thousands of people came into the harbor. And there was a refuge for those people in terms of a safe place. And we're offering a safe place in the Dharma, a safe place to examine our heart, mind, and a practice through the lineages that we know to be true from our own experience. We can say, I've worked with this many times, and I can, like the lighthouse, guide you into the safe, peaceful harbor. The other point I'd like to make today about how long the process takes for some of the things that we've built very strong habits around is that we know we're imperfect. And we're also fearless towards our own vulnerability and our own imperfections. One of the titles of her other books that I like a lot is something like Fail, Fail More, Fail Better. So each time we see ourselves triggered, we're going to fail more and fail better, in the sense that we see ourselves caught in the habitual pattern, but we see ourselves caught more swiftly. So we're failing more, but we're seeing more of our subtle triggers that take us away from the present moment. And we're failing better because we have more experience and are at home with a practice that is going to allow us to see with wisdom the nature of the habitual patterns, which is illusory, just like the bubbles are illusory. And we're becoming fearless because we want to work with this. We see our own pain. We see how our pain causes pain in our environment. And we want to offer peace as bodhisattvas. So another quote from the chapter. Actually, over time, we realize it's like a phantom. When we stay in aversion, it dissolves. It's not an opponent that we're struggling against. It's not anything except energy that gets solidified and that we justify. And then on the basis of that justification, we hurt people. So we're shifting from struggling with our mind as though it were an opponent to relaxing compassionately and allowing that compassion. And we know if we're tense, then everyone around us feels uncomfortable. If we're relaxed and compassionate, then everyone around us feels that peaceful quality, and then eventually the compassionate quality. So looking at ourselves as the human condition and our own capacity to shift how we relate to samsara, how we relate to our own habitual patterns, will have an effect on everyone around us and will allow us to become a more reliable Dharma refuge and have greater and greater capacity to work with larger and larger groups of people. So it said, for instance, that the numbers of people a bodhisattva can affect is like a great ox makes a footprint in the water, a footprint in the sand, and that fills with a certain amount of water. Whereas a Buddha can affect limitless beings. So we're trying to be on the path to become the ox, and then being propelled along that path until we fully awaken our Buddha nature, benefiting all sentient beings. So we have some time for thoughts and reflections, and first I'll do a short dedication and we'll stop the live YouTube so that we can express without it being worldwide. Bodhicitta, excellent and precious mind, where it is unborn may it arise, where it is born may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher.